Welcome to my preview of the Guaranteed Rate Bowl featuring 6-6 West Virginia going up against 8-4 Minnesota on Tuesday, December 28th, 10:15. So a late one, but definitely one I think that you want to tune in for here. 10:15 ESPN. Minnesota favored by 4.5 points and given a 61.1% chance of winning. This is going to be a really good game. It's West Virginia, not a team that was necessarily on my radar, especially at the beginning of the year, but I did a collab with Kuz from Kuz's Corner. If you're a West Virginia fan, for sure, definitely look him up. But of college football in general, he does everything. He does a great job of previewing games. He really knows his stuff. Definitely a guy you want to check out. I'm going to put his channel in the description for this video, so make sure you like and subscribe his. While you're at it, make sure you like and subscribe my channel as well. I'm Boise State focused, but I go through it. I go all the college football teams as well, and we're going through every single bowl game, previewing every single bowl matchup this season, and I'm having a blast doing it. But back to Kuz. He's a guy that does a great job with his videos, exploded this season, just started this year, over 1,000 subscribers already, so again, make sure you want to go check him out. But he's really kind of brought my attention to West Virginia, and I'm glad that he did, because you look at this game, a 6-6 West Virginia team going up against an 8-4 team from the Big Ten here in Minnesota. So 6-6 team from the Big 12, who... Well, I love the Big 12, and I really am a big supporter of that conference, and I think that most years they match up well against the Power 5. Has admittedly, and I think Big 12 fans would also admit this, has had a bit of a down year. The flagship programs have not stood up necessarily for the Big 12. They didn't make it into the playoffs this season. Oklahoma, coming off the rails. Oklahoma State, losing to Baylor down the stretch and missing out on the playoffs there, which I really think if they'd won, they would have bumped out Cincinnati, got into that playoff spot. So the Big 12, you look at Big 12 that's maybe having a little bit of a down year versus a Big 10 that has just had an incredible year. Normally, I'm not as big a fan of the Big Ten, but I have to admit that at least at the top, they are very, very strong this season. So you look at a 6-6 West Virginia team from a conference that's maybe having a little bit of a down year versus a 8-4 Minnesota team that's definitely, 8-4 team out of the Big Ten that's definitely has a huge upside this season. You might say, well, this is going to be a blowout by Minnesota. Well, I'm glad that Q's has drawn my attention to West Virginia, that I ended up watching or paying attention to a lot more West Virginia games than I would have normally, because this is a underrated West Virginia team. It definitely is. They're going through a rebuild year. Kuz and I talked about that on his channel. They definitely are going through a rebuild year this season, but it's a West Virginia team that really, you look at 6-6, but it's 6-6 with a lot of, a lot of things that they've had to combat this season, and they've been close in most of those games. Going against the Minnesota team, who we're going to look at here, that record might be a little bit deceptive, because while the Big Ten has a big upside, Minnesota hasn't had to play those teams or play most of those teams with the big upside this season. So it's going to be a very, very interesting one. I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think. I'll give you my score prediction not my score prediction, but my winner-loser prediction at the end of this video. So make sure you stick around. Let's get into series history here. Well, there is none. It's first ever matchup between these two teams. That is a trend throughout the bowl season this year. So many teams meeting for the first time. Record reviews, West Virginia actually having the year I thought they would. I was projecting 6-6. Athlon Sports saying they would go 7-5, but I recognized that this was going to be a little bit of a rebuild year for the Mountaineer program this season, and it definitely was. But like I said, a program with a lot of upside that's moving in the right direction. For Minnesota, shooting just above expectations. I was saying that they were going to go 7-5. And that's exactly or just above what they ended up doing. Athlon Sports saying 7-5 as well. So they ended up 8-4, one more win than expected. But honestly, pretty close predictions on both of these schools. And how did they get that record? Well, West Virginia, so really their worst losses of the season were against Maryland and Texas Tech. Those aren't teams you want to lose against. Both of them, getting to bowl both those teams getting to bowl eligibility. So at least they're the bowl eligible programs. But West Virginia, you want to reach a point where you are above this middle of the curve Power 5 conference separation. You want to be a team that isn't middle level losing to middle to lower tier Power 5 teams. You want to be a program that gets to being a top tier team, and maybe with the exit of Oklahoma and Texas here, maybe a less of a draw for recruiting. Maybe West Virginia will be able to kind of fight their way in, but they're in a tough spot geographically here, competing against the rest of the Big 12, especially when it comes to recruiting. So it's going to be interesting to see how West Virginia can continue to build their program, but I think they're definitely turning a corner. Last year going 6-4, which was a good year for them, but it was also with the whole COVID situation and playing mostly a conference-only schedule there. And then 5-7 the year before that. I think they're moving in the right direction, and they were really close this season. So they 6-6 overall. So losses to Illinois, losses to Maryland, losses to Texas Tech. But they also have wins against two top 25 schools, and that's just been the kind of up and down year that this Mountaineer program has had. So They won against number 15 Virginia Tech, 27-21 win, and a win against a number 22 Iowa State team. Now, both those schools not necessarily having the season that was expected of them when they were ranked, but Iowa State, a team that still ended up having a pretty good season overall, and West Virginia was able to beat them. But if you look up up and down season, if you look up seesaw season in Wikipedia, you'll find West Virginia right next to them, or you should, because they have had absolutely the absolute definition of an up and down year, because they have won and lost all their games by twos. They've won 2 games, and then they've lost 2 games. And then they've won 2 games, and then they've lost 2 games. And unfortunately for West Virginia, they're sitting here with 2 wins. So going on, mathematically here, they're due for a loss. But hopefully here they can pull off a win here against this Gopher program that we're going to talk about here right now is, I think, a little bit overrated, and here's why. They really didn't play anybody. So the Big Ten, yeah, huge upside to that conference this year. Definitely at the top. You talk about Michigan, Michigan State, Iowa, Ohio State. Those teams, among the best in the country at the top. But the rest of the conference, when you compare the middle to the bottom tier of this conference, does not match up very well across the country. And that's always been the problem for the Big Ten, in my opinion, is that they've always been top heavy. They've always been a conference that, yeah, they have some good teams at the top of it, but the rest of the teams just don't stack up well. You have a conference, in the same conference that you have Ohio and Michigan State and Michigan, you also have teams like Illinois and Maryland and Rutgers. Really, as far as basement programs go, basement dweller programs, the Big Ten has a higher number of basement dwellers than really any other conference besides maybe the ACC. And those are the teams that Minnesota has played this season. So they have losses this year, to Illinois, a team that finished 5-7, and Bowling Green, a team that finished 4-8. So they have losses against both those schools. Yes, they played Ohio State well, or they were close in that game early in the season, 45-31 loss. It looked like Ohio State was on the ropes there a little bit, but Ohio State had to find their footing, especially with their new quarterback here. But Stroud was able to figure it out and push it down the stretch. And so a very different program. If Ohio State played Minnesota now, it'd be a blowout for sure. Let's look at their wins. Really, the only good team that they played in the Big Ten, the really only quality win, was a win against number 14 Wisconsin, who finished up the season 8-4. That is a good win. That's definitely a good win for Minnesota. So they've proven they can win, but they've also proven that they can definitely give it up against bad teams here in Illinois and Bowling Green. And then you look at the rest of their games, a 4-point win against Miami, Ohio, wins against Purdue, Nebraska, Indiana. Really the only upside when it comes into this game here, as far as saying maybe they can pull out, maybe they can get this win here, is that they got a 34-16 win against Maryland, a team that West Virginia lost to. But I think you should always take losses that happen at the beginning of the season, wins or losses at the beginning of the season, with a grain of salt, because the team that you see at the beginning of the year is oftentimes not at all close to being the team you see at the end of the season. We just talked about Ohio State going from a team that really looked like they were going to be out of it this year to almost being in the playoffs, just outside of it with that loss to Michigan. So this is not a program necessarily that I think would lose. Like I said, I don't think it's a West Virginia program that would lose to Maryland if they played them today. And so I don't think you can just take across the board, hey, Minnesota beat Maryland, West Virginia didn't. Minnesota's going to win this game. You really can't compare it that way. Every team can beat every other team. I mean, Nebraska almost beat some teams, and they were terrible this year. So every team can beat any team out there in college football, and it's definitely something that you got to take away from any Saturdays. Nothing is for sure. So looking at this game here, as far as top players go, for West Virginia, yeah, they have some great players, but I'm actually going to focus on their linebacker here, because in my mind, he's one of the best linebackers in the country. I'm gonna totally butcher his name here, but I think it's Josh Chandler Semedo, or it's Semedo. So West Virginia fans, you'll be able to say it. Coos, you can correct me. Let me know how I'm supposed to say this. But anyhow, we're just going to call him Josh, the linebacker here. He's 5'10", so he's a little bit undersized for a linebacker, 226, 5'10". But man, does he play well beyond his height. Does he play with all the energy and passion on the field? He is an absolute baller. 104 tackles this season, 1.5 sacks, 3 passes defended. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. 2 interceptions and 2 forced fumbles. So he is a guy who's going to wrap up and bring you to the ground, and while he's doing that, he's going to knock the ball out in the way. This is a guy who has had an incredible season. I think he is up for a big game here, going against a Minnesota team that really doesn't have anybody. I mean, you look at them, 8 wins. I think those 8 wins are because they've played nobody, besides, of course, Wisconsin. Nobody jumps out on this team. All their receivers are under, I think they're all under 400 or 500 yards receiving. All of their running backs, you don't have a single running back that's got more than 700 yards rushing, and their quarterback here under 2,000 yards passing. They've definitely spread the ball about. They've definitely spread the ball around between a lot of different players this season, but they really don't have a star guy that steps up and is going to draw attention on this team. If you're going to look at somebody, I guess it would be their quarterback here, Tanner Morgan. 1,935 yards passing, but he's thrown almost as many picks as touchdowns, and he's barely thrown any touchdowns. 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So I really don't know who steps up on this Minnesota team. I've watched them play twice this year, and I was surprised by how they were able, I was surprised that they were that close in the Ohio State game, and I was very surprised that they got the win against Wisconsin. I think a lot of that comes down to just being in the right place, right time, circumstantial kind of. I think that, West Virginia definitely underrated in this one. I think they're the better team in this game. I really do, and that's going to be my key for this, is for West Virginia, don't read the newspaper clippings. You're the better team in this one, so play like it. Come in with confidence. Don't read the 61.1% chance of, or I guess you convert that the other way around, it'd be a 39% chance of winning. Don't read the 39% chance of winning. Don't read that you're the underdogs in this one by 4.5 points. Don't read that you have a 6-6 record versus an 8-4 record from the opposing team. Don't read into any of that. West Virginia, I honestly believe that you're the better program in this one. You might not have the percentage odds to win this, but you definitely match up well on paper. And when you look at the record that West Virginia's had overall this season, it's been an up and down year, but I think that West Virginia can end the seesaw with a win at the end of the season to kind of push themselves to getting to that next level. I'm not saying that next year's West Virginia team is going to take that step forward next year. I think it's all going to come down to how things go in the offseason. But I think that West Virginia can end the season on a high note to catapult themselves into the offseason and start pushing towards a successful 2022 campaign. As far as Minnesota goes, for them, someone's got to step up. Honestly, someone has got to step up here. Is it going to be Morgan? Is it going to be one of their 3 running backs with over 500 yards rushing? Is it going to be one of their 4 wide receivers with over 200 yards? Like I said, it's great when you see a team that is a total team concept, when they have players across the board, but that's not really what you see when you look at Minnesota. They don't necessarily have a bunch of guys that can all get it done. They just have a bunch of guys that are trying to fill in the gaps to win games when they can, and not necessarily anybody that's stepping up and really being that baller for this team. Like definitely Wisconsin definitely has some of those guys on this program. I really just don't see Minnesota being able to pull this one out. I think West Virginia is the better team in this program. They're underrated. I think West Virginia comes in here and gets a win against a overrated Minnesota team that's sitting here at 8-4, but not really deservedly so after playing some of the worst teams in the country this season and losing to a couple of those worst teams in the country with losses to Illinois and Bowling Green. If you can't get past Illinois and Bowling Green, you're not going to get past West Virginia. So go Mountaineers in this one. Coos, I hope they get the win for you here and end the season on a high note, and I think they definitely will. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. I probably don't have a lot of Minnesota fans left watching this video. I'm not anti-Minnesota. My uncle's from Minnesota, and he's probably not going to like this video. So I'm not anti-Minnesota. I'm really not. I'm not necessarily super pro-West Virginia either. Not that I'm anti-West Virginia, but I just look at Minnesota's record, and I just don't think that they necessarily deserve this 8-4 rating, and I think West Virginia is better than this 6-6 overall, and I think they can finish this up and down with a win. So like I said, whoever's left watching this video, hopefully a couple West Virginia fans at least, make sure you like and subscribe. I'm previewing every single bowl game this season, every single one, so I'm up through the 28th. I got a few more to work on, so like 20 bowl games or something left. Man, there's so many bowl games this year. So make sure you like, subscribe. I'm going through every single one, having a blast doing it, and as always, go Big Blue!